Welcome to Miss Vis's kitchen. I have some good news for you and I have some bad news. So the good news is that we're going to make fresh homemade bread. The bad news is you won't get to eat it till tomorrow. But this is a really lazy recipe. This bread you don't have to knead at all. So I'm going to show you a couple variations, starting with the most simple. If you just want white bread, here's how you do it. So we're going to start with 3 cups of flour. Now I need a 1.5 cups of salt. Sorry, did I say 1.5 cups? 1.5 teaspoons of salt, goodness. Some recipes use less, some recipes use more. I'm going to use 1/2 teaspoon of yeast. Mix that in. Then I'm going to add my 1.5 cups of water. It's going to look pretty sticky, but I'm just going to keep stirring. So now that it's mixed together, I am going to just cover it. You can cover it with saran wrap. If you want, you can just cover it with a plate. That's what I usually do. And then this one is finished until tomorrow. So we're going to let this sit for anywhere between 8 and I think I've let it sit for like 36 hours before. The ideal is probably between 12 and 24 hours. The other variation I'm going to do is one that I think is a bit healthier. So I use different varieties of flour. So the first variety I'm going to use is a multi-grain flour. And I'm going to use 2 cups of multi-grain flour. This bread's going to turn out a little bit more dense because these flours are a little bit heavier, a little bit more dense. So it's not going to rise as much and it's going to have some crunch to it from this. There's cracked wheat in this multigrain and a little bit of flax. So I'm going to use 2 cups of multigrain in this one and 1 cup of rye. Now I'm also going to show you a third variety which I've done with either the white or the multigrain rye one, but I'm going to do it with the white. So if you like your house to smell like pizza or super savory bread, here is a way you can do that. So you're going to take the same recipe that you had, we're just going to add some herbs into it, okay? So this is a recipe that my mom used to use, so shout out to her. So I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of parsley. This is actually parsley from my parents' garden. I'm going to put that in there. And I'm going to use 1/2 teaspoon of garlic, 1/2 teaspoon of thyme, and 1.5 teaspoons each of basil and oregano. If you do the ones with the herbs, I usually add those just into the flour and salt mixture, not at the end. But that's okay. There you go. Those will sit overnight and I'll see you back tomorrow. Welcome back for the rest of the bread. First I have to show you this. My dough went rogue overnight, so it spilled all over the counter. It's extra risen, so that should be fun. And this one is really well behaved, so this is the rye, so it doesn't rise quite as much. What you're going to need today is a oven safe pot. So you could use like a Dutch oven or a casserole dish that has a lid, or you could use a soup pan that has a lid. Basically you need the lid in to trap the steam. Let's preheat our oven to 450 degrees. We also need to preheat the pans, so we are going to put them into our hot oven. You might have to move your racks down in order to make sure that there's enough space for your pots. Now we're going to deal with the rogue dough, and this part can get a bit sticky, so make sure to have some flour on hand. What I like to do is make it on top of just a cutting board, so I'll sprinkle some flour on the cutting board, and that means I can just carry the bread around when I need to. Then we're going to flip the bowls over. This one's going to be really interesting. Just grab all this dough We'll see how this goes. This has never happened to me before, so we're making history right now. Anyways, I'm gonna flip this over onto that cutting board, and I'm gonna flip this one over onto the other cutting board. Just let the dough come out. If it needs a little bit of help, you can grab a spoon and just scoop it out a little bit. This one smells so good. I'm just going to form it into a little bit of like a bread shape. Here I just have my ball of bread that I made. I'm just gonna let it sit on this. I'm gonna grab a little bit more flour so it doesn't stick. Just set it on my cutting board. So that's my first one, that one's ready. Let's get the rye one. Just let it sit here while my oven preheats. Anyway, so we are done for now, and when my oven preheats, I'll show you the next step. So the oven's preheated. Now it's time to pull out these pans, which are super duper hot, so be careful. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take my dough and I'm gonna plop it in these pans. Here is the rye. It's pretty flat, which is okay. I'm just gonna scoop it up. Oh, it's so sticky. A little bit more flour would have been nice. I don't have to grease the pan. I'm just gonna put it in there, and then I'm gonna put it in the oven. But first I'm gonna grab my other dough. This one looks pretty nice. I'm gonna put this loaf in the pan. Make sure not to touch the pan because you might burn yourself. Put the lids back on the pans, and we're gonna put them in the oven for 30 minutes. Okay, so my timer is going off, and now I'm not gonna take the bread out. I'm actually just going to take the lids off. And now we're gonna put another timer on, this time for 15 minutes. Guys, the moment has arrived. We are going to take this bread out of the oven. Woohoo! Oh my goodness, it looks so good. Okay, this is the rye bread. This is that beautiful herb bread. Delicious! It's probably best if you let your bread sit for a couple minutes before slicing it up. But if you just can't resist, go ahead, slice into it. It'll be a little bit crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. If any of this lasts until the next day, put it in the freezer because it doesn't actually keep very well. If you want, put a little bit of butter on it or honey or something, but it's also really good just plain.